If you have a parent who wants to stay at home and you're wondering, how do you have conversations and how do you make sure that they're safe? Today, we're bringing in Allison Starkey, who is a physical therapist and the CEO of Gateway of Charlotte, to have this conversation with us. Thanks so much for being with us, Allison.
Kim, thanks so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here.
For many of us, we have parents that want to stay at home. They're adamant about wanting to stay at home, but we might not feel that they're maybe 100% safe. What are the things that we should be looking for as warning signs of things that maybe we need to make adjustments to the home to make them safer?
So my message today is really that you want to start planning for any home renovations way before you see any signs for the need. What we like to do at Gateway is really educate adult children of older adults. And if you have a parent that is really committed to staying at home, in the cold light of day, it's much easier to have a conversation with them about, you were thinking about renovating your bathroom. Maybe we should look at doing that now and maybe incorporate some things that would make it safer for you if you end up having difficulty walking around. I think that's a much easier conversation, starting when you don't need it. If
Right.
you're looking for signs of, when you have a parent that, really might be starting to be a fall risk, there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, you can request from the patient or your parent's doctor to get a physical therapist involved. And you can go see any physical therapist as an outpatient, and they'll do routine testing that will really determine if your parent, A, is at risk of falling, and B, what they can do about it. But the other things that you can see is like sometimes getting up from a lower chair or a couch, that it takes them a little longer, that they have to kind of lean forward far to stand up. And then also just watching them move. Sometimes you'll see a senior, they're kind of holding on to the wall as they go past. Like in a hallway, you and I would just, we wouldn't be holding on to anything, we would just walk. But a senior tends to kind of hold on to the back of the sofa, transfer the other hand to holding the back of a chair. Same in the kitchen, they kind of follow the counter around, but they always have a hand on something. And that's a very good sign that it's time to take action.
And that would be along with potentially looking for some of those things that we know are the obvious fall risk, right? Like if you have a lot of rugs or if the lighting is not very good. So those would, I guess, be things that you can just be kind of observing that
Yes.
are potential problems, but also what you're talking about is more how are they moving around and
Yes.
what could that lead to?
Yes. So if someone is holding on to what we describe as cruising furniture, just holding off from one part to the other, then we know that they're not confident in their balance, and that's absolutely consistently going to be a balance issue. But a physical therapist will be able to diagnose that for you, and the good news is physical therapy really helps you balance. So.
So when we're thinking about home modifications, it could be how do you determine what sort of modifications we might need? We think of the obvious sort of grab bars maybe in the shower or in the bathroom. What are some other modifications that could be really useful?
So what's really important is to kind of look at the situation and look at both parents. See if there's any like comorbidities, like does someone have Parkinson's? Is someone at risk for a stroke? Does someone have poor circulation? And then, we need to sit down with them and have a conversation with them and say, listen, I want you to be able to do what you want to do, which is to age in place. But in order for us to do that, we're going to have to make some changes. I always try to have adult children approach the situation with their parents, encouraging their parents to think about the impact on yourself. So for instance, if I was talking to my mother, I'd say, I'm really concerned because if you have a fall with all that's going on with the kids and the rest of the family, I don't know how I'm going to be able to stay working and be able to help you out. So I want us to come up with a plan that's going to keep you safe at home.
Well, and certainly the fact of that we know a fall often leads to just a decline in health. And so we, if we're trying to also, I guess, come from the perspective of that, I want you to be safe because I don't want
Absolutely.
anything to happen to you. And I don't want you
Yeah.
to be in the hospital or break a hip or that kind of thing.
Well, a third of all people that fall over don't survive the fall. falls are deadly. You can either bang your head and have a head injury. If you crack your pelvis, you can lay on the floor and die, and die from bleeding out.
Mhm.
So falls are really, really important things that we try to avoid. And every PT in the business that's our biggest focus when it comes to seniors.
Yeah. So I could see where even in our family that if I suggest things like a grab bar or some of the obvious, pretty simple modifications, that probably would be, fine. I think if I started talking about, a stair lift would really be helpful because that way you could get, you can use all of your house. You don't have to try to figure out how to either add a bedroom downstairs because maybe there's not a bedroom downstairs. How do a stair lift could be a great option to be able to help you do that or a bathroom remodel maybe that they weren't already planning. How do you have those conversations when it's something that is a little bit of a bigger project?
So again, I think you put it back on them and say you've told us that you really want to stay at home, but with your master bedroom and bathroom upstairs, we need to have a conversation about that, because what if there comes a time where you really can't go up and down the stairs safely? And the last thing we want you to do is fall down the stairs.
Mhm.
There are many solutions. You mentioned a stair lift. Stair lifts are great. They've come an awful long way in the last 10 years. It used to be that stair lifts would take up, half of the staircase itself. So if you had an able-bodied person in the house, they'd have to kind of creep around the stair lift to get upstairs. But now they snug up to the wall and they're out of the way, so it leaves the staircase open. We're seeing in our particular practice, we also recommend a lot of elevators, and people,
Mm.
kind of look at me quizzically and say, well, gosh, I can't afford an elevator. But the thing about an elevator is if you are in a wheelchair and you want to go upstairs, it's quite challenging to continue to use a stair lift, especially if you're not able to sit securely. You have to be able to sit
Mhm.
securely to use a stair lift. And the great thing about an elevator, it not only adds value to your house, but
Mhm.
you can use it as long as you need, to be able to go upstairs, because you can use a wheelchair in there.
Mhm.
So for someone that's really committed and we're looking at a longer timeline and no way that they're ever going to, entertain being placed, sometimes an elevator is a great solution.
Okay. Yeah. That not something that people, I think something that is becoming more accessible where it's still a big project, but it's not as big of a project as maybe it might have been maybe even 5 or 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are now elevators that you can get that don't require a shaft, that are very user friendly and not out of control expensive. And I think the cost of these renovations is a little scary to some people, but you also have to compare it to
Mm.
if your parent does have a fall and they end up in a nursing home, the cost of a nursing home as opposed to being able to stay at home
Mhm.
and enjoy that time at home. Um, Even with the cost of care at home, there's that intangible that most adults have, which is, I just want to stay in my own house.
Right. So playing off the comparison of, bathroom renovation or a stair
Mhm.
lift or other modifications or an elevator, what is the cost of that compared to the potentially really high cost of having to be in a nursing home or something like that where you're going to need a lot of care?
Yeah, I think it's important to compare those numbers because everyone, I mean, I think those numbers are shocking to the average Joe, but you really do need to compare them to, the cost of nursing homes in your area.
Mhm. The cost of those can be quite shocking as well, right? I mean, when you
Absolutely.
start
Yeah.
adding those up. So I think the message here is really trying to be more proactive than reactive because I think a lot of times there is a fall or there is something that happens that makes you think, oh, there's a problem. And maybe mom already has a broken hip. And now we're looking at renovations or updates versus trying to do it to prevent the
Yes.
fall.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. So, being proactive on the front end is really the way that you want to go. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you've been talking about this for 5 years and your parents have just kind of declined the conversation, and then somebody does have an injury, a big injury with a fall, it means that you just have to kind of get things going as soon as possible so they can come home.
Hmm. And any last words of wisdom, just as far as I guess part of what I've learned so much leading this community is you have to figure out what's going to appeal to your parent, whether it would be a gift to me. I want to protect you. It's going to be better for dad. I think it's really just figuring out what might appeal to them. Yeah.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the fears when people hear about bathroom renovations, they're worried that their new bathroom is going to look like a hospital, that's going to be sort of stainless steel bars and,
Mhm.
and it just kind of look ugly. The fact of the matter is that there are beautiful fittings available, and you can incorporate fittings that are beautiful but also functional, to the
Mm.
point where if you walked into a bathroom with the right kinds of fittings, you would have no idea that something was functioning as a grab bar. You would just assume it was a
Mm.
fancy shower. So I think
Ah.
also making the renovations very aesthetically pleasing and kind of fitting in. Yeah, I mean, if I was doing my bathroom, I'd want it to look nice. I'd want everything matchy matchy and not to look like a hospital. So that's the other thing that we really try to educate the public about. If you go to the big box stores, that there are plenty of options,
Mhm.
that they might be special order, but certainly you can look on the website, and it's amazing the selection that they have these days.
And when you look at some of those, it might make the idea of doing some of these modifications not feel so scary or institutional, like as you mentioned.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly so.
Yeah.
And then get them interested in color and tile and all of that, and you may have a success on your hands.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your words of wisdom today.
You're so welcome, Kim. Thanks again for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
And if you have other ideas that you'd like us to tackle on parenting aging parents, just let us know.